Alright guys, welcome back to part 2 of how to set up a Planet Tank 101. Hopefully if you guys haven't checked out part 1, make sure you guys check that out. So we went through all the planning, the hardscape, the substrate, and the lighting in part 1. So in part 2 I'm going to be covering the layouts. By layouts I mean where to place your plant, where to set it up, and that kind of stuff. Stocking plus, I guess, filter. So kind of like what you generally want to have in your Planet Tank in terms of livestock and aeration and stuff like that. And then the last part is probably the funnest part. You guys will get to see what the final layout slash plants and everything, how it'll look when you kind of have all of the stuff together, planned out and finalized. So let's go ahead and let's get on to the next part. Alright, so let's talk about the layout. Depending on your hardscape, you generally kind of go with a basic. Obviously the front you'll have your foreground plants, so like the smaller plants like HC, stuff that generally doesn't grow as tall. Not to say that you can't keep tall stuff, but this is kind of a rule of thumb to kind of just keep in mind, because you want to kind of have that nice height where it's gradually staying low and going all the way back. Now this tank here, I kind of did this, and let me explain to you how it works. So in the front here, I plan on growing some star repens right here. So they generally grow about this tall. And then I have the next foreground, Japonica Blixa, is slightly taller than these, so it kind of gives that elevated height. And as you go further back, as you can see back here, the stem plants, they're the tall ones, and I usually generally have them all the way in the back. Now depending on how you scape your tank, like this one was set up for breeding, so I have a piece of driftwood here. What I wanted to do was kind of enclose that driftwood and have a flat here to simulate a nice room for these pairs. And really they're just going to be breeding on that rock, and everything else I wanted to be spacious for the fish and to make them feel secure by having these plants kind of just hover over as they grow taller. Now the layout is very key, and most likely if you guys don't have experience in it, make sure you guys play around with it, and trial and error is like the best. Basically start with the foreground plants and then have the stem plants in the back, and then I always like to move plants. Like these weren't like, oh, exactly where I wanted to have the plants initially. I actually ended up moving a lot of stuff around until it fit the way I liked it and how it looked in the tank. So definitely shape your tank as you go along, and you know, people change, and you know, your tank can change to fit your mood. So that's the cool thing about owning, you know, a Planet Tank, is you can scape it the way you like it. So like if you really like shorter plants, all these stem plants you can just trim down, right, and just not have it as tall. For me, I kind of like tall and a mixture. And you know, not to say that a lot of these do need trimming, but this is just an example for a layout. So really plan it out and just feel it out, and if you like it that way, you can keep it that way. It does not have to follow that rule, but it's just more of a basic tip. Another thing you want to look for when you're setting out the layout is what kind of lighting does these plants need. So depending on where your fixture is, if it's dead center on the tank, obviously the center part of the tank will have the most light, and as you go further away from the light fixture, it's going to get less light. And also if you know your plants are taller, certain stuff is going to get blocked, so you kind of want to plan around that as well. If you know, for example, if you're going to grow baby tiers, you may want to position the light fixture towards the baby tier a little bit more, because they generally require a little bit more lighting. or you want to kind of place the baby tears away from taller stems so that they can get that lighting that they need. So for me, I knew that some of these middle plants here require a little bit more lighting, and I put those towards here along the center on purpose. So that's a little tip to keep in mind when you're laying out or planning your layout of your planted tank. Alright, so let's move on to stocking your planted tank and some, I guess, filtration and some sort of, I guess, aeration in the tank. So let's start with filters. Generally, any filter will work fine in a planted tank. The one thing that you want to have is really good circulation. You want to kind of have stuff moving either via air stone or via your output of your canister filter or your hang on the back filter. It doesn't really matter. Make sure you have a good current so that it helps with stagnant, because what happens is certain algae will grow if you don't have enough circulation going through. And plus, with circulation, it helps with the fish and your livestock's oxygen levels as well. So it's really quick in terms of the filter portion, but let's go ahead and get into the stocking. Now, for a planted tank, obviously you can stock whatever you want, but there are certain fishes that can't really go with it and whatnot. But generally you can do whatever you want, and that's fine. But what I wanted to cover in the stocking portion is to help with your planted tank, things that you may want to consider adding as a staple for your planted tank. So a couple fish I highly recommend in a planted tank, and this is for algae control, because in a planted tank you will have algae. Like, people who say that you never had algae before, never had the issue, they're lying to you. Algae exists in the water columns everywhere and anywhere. And it's just a matter of time when your tank goes unbalanced and bam, the algae strikes. So like this tank, it looks like that there's no algae, but there is algae in this tank. So anyways, so let's go ahead and talk about those critters. So when I say critters, there's going to be a lot of snails I highly recommend getting. Snails do a great job in cleaning the tank and keeping your algae under control. So definitely check out snails. The only thing with snails are they do tend to lay eggs, and they lay a lot of eggs. So if you don't like that, you may want to consider other options, as I will list them. Otters. Otters are great little fishies. They pretty much will take care of a lot of form of algae, and they're small, so they're relatively small, and they won't grow much bigger than, you know, like yay big. And you can get a nice school of them, and they'll do their thing, and they'll be in the back. And the next one I highly recommend is an SAE, or a Siamese algae eater. Now, I know that they do grow kind of big, so depending on your tank size, you may not be able to grow or have these guys in the tank. But if you are able to, I highly recommend having them. Why? Because these guys, they're able to eat certain algae that people struggle with. For example, hair algae, blackbeard algae. I've seen them eat those as well, really good. A lot of, I guess, things they don't really like that, and it's terrible to kind of get rid of via like manual. Those are really good fish. Another one I highly recommend is a bristlenose pleco. They grow about 6 inches, yay big, and they do very well in terms of algae control. There's other fish as well, but those fish those livestock, I guess, with snails, fish plus snails, I usually tend to go to because they're small, they're easy, they're hardy, and you can get them really pretty much anywhere. And actually in all of my tanks I have these guys. So just a tip, consider getting some of these livestock to control your algae. Alright, in that final stage on how to do or set up a planted tank is obviously adding the plants. So once you have the plants that you want, it's really easy. You can use tools to do it. I just straight up use my hands. It's a lot easier. It can be a lot easier, but
pretty much like I said, I have HCs in the front here. It took about 6 pots. And then in the back I have some japonicas. From my other tank I have 4 of them. The one in the middle there, I had to weigh it down with a rock, as you can see, a small piece of rock, because it was a trim and it didn't have any roots, so it couldn't grab onto anything. But pretty much once the roots are established there, I will pull that rock out. But that's it. It's that simple on setting up a Planet tank. And then from here, make sure your tank cycle before you add any livestock. You can do a quick cycle with a seeded filter, or you can add some of the quick start or some form of bacteria into the tank to start that cycle. But another tip to this is make sure that the light is dialed in, like I said or mentioned before. Just keep it at 7 hours first, and then either adjust up or down from there, because you don't want more light than that. And that's it, guys. Thank you for watching, and peace.